Clutching a torn backpack, he stood at the edge of the biker lot, a world of roaring engines and leather vests that smelled of oil and smoke. When he spoke, his voice was too steady for someone that small. "Can one of you be my dad for just one day?" The laughter that followed wasn't cruel, just confused, until the club president killed his engine, stepped off his Harley, and asked, "Who sent you, kid?" The answer froze every man.
The laughter that followed wasn't cruel,
he said,
just confused, until the club president killed his engine, stepped off his Harley, and asked, "Who sent you, kid?" The answer froze every man. The laughter that followed wasn't cruel, he said, just confused, until the club president killed his engine, stepped off his Harley, and asked, "Who sent you, kid?" The answer froze every man. The laughter that followed wasn't cruel, he said, just confused, until the club president killed his engine, stepped off his Harley, and asked, "Who sent you, kid?" The answer froze every man. The laughter that followed wasn't cruel, he said, just confused, until the club president killed his engine, stepped off his Harley, and asked, "Who sent you, kid?" The answer froze every man. The laughter that followed wasn't cruel, he said, just confused, until the club president killed his engine, stepped off his Harley, and asked, "Who sent you, kid?" The answer froze every man. The laughter that followed wasn't cruel, he said, just confused, until the club president killed his engine, stepped off his Harley, and asked, "Who sent you, kid?" The answer froze every man. The laughter that followed wasn't cruel, he said,
in the room, behind a startled bed, Saturday still sound, 40-something. There was a man who'd been through more fights and conversations. Tattoos laying down his arm at that dark room. Most noticed, the one on his right forearm, a grimace for leaving smoke. He was cleaning his gun, quiet and methodical, as Don looked through the blind. The others knew better than to disturb him during these hours, the silence before the day's meal. A ritual that kept his needs at bay. Rafe was the kind of man who didn't believe in second chances. But life, slow and strange as it was, had decided to give him one anyway. Whether he wanted it or not, outside, a dust storm was trying to rise. Little swirls spinning across the parking lot. The only movement came from a small figure walking down the empty road. A boy, maybe 8 years old, wearing sneakers held together with duct tape and two big hoodies that used to be red, but now looked more like a dessert. Itself, he clutched something in his hand, a creased photograph, and walked with it. Purpose that didn't belong to him. Someone decides out when he reached the clubhouse gate. He stopped. The sign above Reed's private property trespassers will bleed. He hesitated, swallowed, and then did something brave and foolish at once. He walked right in, inside. A biker named Tank, a mountain of a man with a beard like roadkill and a heart he didn't admit. He had spotted him first. Hey, what the hell? The boy froze. He looked around at the bike, the men, the chaos, and for a moment, it was clear he was scared out of his mind. I'm looking for someone, he said. Doc Hank frowned. Kid, this ain't no trick. You lost. The boy shook his head, gripping the photograph tight. My mom said, to find the man with the skull tattoo. They got their attention. A few men exchanged worried looks. Others laughed, thinking it a prank. One of them, a winged biker named Slim, leaned forward from the couch, a cigarette dangling from his mouth. Well, ain't that cute? Slim said, we got ourselves a scavenger hunt. You hear that, Ghost? He's looking for your ugly mug. Rafe didn't look up. Tell him to keep walking. But the boy took a few steps closer, his feet scraping the concrete. He held out the photograph, shaking but determined. Please, sir, my mom said you helped. She said you owe her a ride. That stopped everything. Even the radio went silent. Rafe finally lifted his eyes. He saw a boy with dirt-streaked cheeks, hair that hadn't seen a comb in weeks, and eyes as serious for his age. The picture in his hand was old, bent, creased, but clear enough. A woman in a nurse's uniform, smiling softly at the camera. On the back, written in faithfully, was a name, Laura. Rafe's jaw tightened. For the first time in years, he forgot to breathe. The room blurred for a moment, replaced by a memory, asphalt under his back, headlights spinning, the taste of iron and blood in his mouth. He'd been shot twice that night, ambushed by a rival crew out on Highway 19. He remembered the sound of engines fading, his brother scattered, and the cold almost certain that he wasn't giving up again. Then, the crunch of tires gave in. A woman's voice. Stay with me, Ray. You hear me? You don't die tonight. He remembered her hands, steady and warm despite the chaos, cutting open his vest, pulling the bullet from his shoulder with nothing but a pair of pliers and pure stubbornness. He tried to tell her to leave, but they'd come back, but she didn't. When he woke up in a hospital bed 2 days later, she was gone. No name, no record, just a ghost who saved the ghost. Now her son stood in front of him. Ray stood slowly, his chair scraping the floor. The boy flinched but didn't back away. What's your name? Ray asked. Eli. And where's your mom now? The boy hesitated, his lower lip trembled. I don't know. She told me to find you. She said, if she didn't come back, you'd make sure I was safe. A murmur rippled through the room. Ray's expression didn't change, but his fingers curled in a fist. She didn't come back from where? Ellie's voice broke when he spoke. Some men came. They had guns. She told me to run. Hank knelt down beside the boy. His gravelly voice softened now. What kind of men? Eli shook his head. I don't know. They had black cars, and one of them said something about the shipment. They've exchanged a look with Slim. The kind that said this isn't random. Ridgefall was full of dirty wheels and missing people, but this smelled different. They got the kids some water and a sandwich. He ate like he hadn't seen food in days. Between bites, he told them fragments of his story, how they moved from town to town, how his mom worked in clinics and shelters, patching up addicts and drifters for free. She said people don't need heroes. He said quietly, they just need someone who doesn't walk away. That line hit Rafe harder than the whiskey ever could. He studied the boy while the others pretended not to. There was a small scar on Ellie's arm, clean, old, surgical. The kind of scar left by someone who knew how to treat wounds. Your mom do that. Rafe asked. Doc. Eli nodded. She said I fell off a bike, but I think she lied. She always lied when she wanted to protect me. Rafe looked away, swallowing hard. Mara had been like that too, fearless on the outside, breaking on the inside Doc by noon. The clubhouse felt smaller, as if the walls were closing. Slim wanted to take the boy to the sheriff. Hank argued that wasn't safe. Ridgefall's cops were more loyal to caste and conscience. Rafe said nothing for a long time. He just stared at the photograph, tracing the edges like it might give him answers. Finally, he stood and walked toward the boy. You said your mom told you to find the man with the skull tattoo. Rafe said. Eli nodded. Why? She said you owed her a life. Rafe crouched so they were I let her. You know what that means, kid. Eli met his gaze, unflinching. It means you're supposed to save someone, and now it's my turn. Something in that answer. Innocent. Brutal. True. Cracked something open in Rafe he hadn't felt in yet. That night, after the others drifted out, Rafe sat alone in the garage. The boy was asleep on a couch, a blanket too big for him pulled up to his chin. Rafe smoked in silence, staring at the skull tattoo on his arm. The dessert wind rattled the window, carrying echoes of the past. The sound of gunfire, a woman's voice saying, you don't die tonight. He pulled out his old photo box, the one he swore he'd never open again. Inside were the ghosts of another life, patches from fallen brothers, his parole papers, and a blood-stained piece of cloth from the night he almost died. And tucked inside that cloth, a name written on the back of the clinic card, Mark Helen. He'd never gone looking for her. Maybe he'd been afraid to. Maybe he thought he didn't deserve to. But now her son was sleeping under his roof, and she was out there somewhere, in danger. Maybe worse. Rafe crushed out his cigarette and stood. His reflection in the window looked older than it should have, but his eyes were alive again, sharp, focused, and filled with a purpose he hadn't felt in a decade. He turned to Tank, who'd been quietly watching from the doorway. Get the boys, Rafe said. We're gonna find her. Tank raised an eyebrow. You sure about that? Could be a trap. Rafe's voice was low, steady. Don't care. That woman saved my life once. I ain't letting her slip away. He looked toward the couch, where Eli stirred in his sleep, murmuring his mother's name. Besides, Rafe added quietly, he had already lost enough. By the time the engines roared the life outside, the desert was dark again, and the ghosts of Ridgefall were awake. Rafe didn't know yet what he was riding into, or how deep the trouble ran. All he knew was this: the woman who once refused to let him die had sent her son to him for a reason, and for the first time in years, the outlaw known as Ghost Donovan felt like he might be about to live for something.
or someone that actually mattered. The morning started with the sound of engines, a low, steady rumble that seemed to shake the desert away. Great Ghost Donovan stood beside his Harley, watching the sun climb over Ridgefall. The light caught on the chrome, on the cracked asphalt, on the dust that never seemed to settle. Here, he wasn't used to mornings that felt this quiet or this strange. A kid was sleeping on his clubhouse couch, a kid who called him Dad, even if just for one day. When Eli woke, he blinked like someone who didn't quite trust that the world was still here. Rafe handed him a mug of cocoa, dark, no sugar, the only kind they had, and a breakfast sandwich wrapped in foil. The boy held it with both hands. You made this. Not exactly, Rafe said, half grinning. Tank burner. I rescued it. Team effort. Eli laughed softly, a sound that startled the room. The other bikers froze mid-argument, like they'd just heard something rare and delicate. It was the first time any of them had seen Rafe smile, without whiskey behind him. Later that morning, the kid's whisk came up again, half a joke, half a dare. You really said you wanted one of us to be your dad for a day. Slim asked. Leaning against his bike, Eli nodded. Yeah, just one day. That's what Mom said to ask for. Rafe gave him a curious look. Why one day? Eli thought about it. She said one day's enough to see who someone really is. That shut Slim up. Rafe figured there was no harm in it. The kid needed distraction, and maybe, if he was honest, so did he. So he told the boys to clear their schedules. No business, no runs, no fights, just one clean day. They didn't understand why their leader suddenly cared about a stray, but none dared argue. They followed Rafe because, when he gave an order, it was never random. Tank handed Eli a helmet. All right, little man, you ever been on a Harley before? Ellie's eyes went wide. No, sir. Don't call me sir. Tank grunted. Makes me sound respectable. The boy grinned, and just like that, the toughest man in Ridgefall melted. The first stop was the open road dot. The wind hit Ellie's face as freedom itself. He sat in front of Rafe, tiny hands gripping the handlebars that he couldn't really reach. The bike thundered down the desert highway, the horizon stretching forever. Ahead, redder blue sky, and the kind of silence only found far from people. Rafe leaned close so the boy could hear him over the roar. Breathed in, kid, that's what freedom smells like. It smells like oil and bugs. Eli shouted. Rafe laughed, a real, unguarded laugh. Yeah, that too. For a moment, the outlaw felt something he hadn't in years. Light. They stopped at a roadside diner. Betty's Pancake House, a faded sign hanging by one chain. The kind of place that still served coffee in chipped mugs and butter in foil packets. Eli devoured 3 pancakes, the sausages, and half of Rafe's bacon before Rafe even noticed. Kid, you eat like you're running from the law. Slim joked. Eli shrugged. We used to move around a lot. Mom said never to waste food, cause you don't know when you'll eat again. Rafe nodded quietly, cutting another pancake in half and sliding it to him. Across the booth, Tank muttered, hell, he's got better manners than we do. Yeah, Slim said, that's what happens when you be raised by wolves. Speak for yourself. Tank shot back. Eli giggled again, and for a while, that sound filled the diner better than any jukebox ever could. Even the waitress smiled, handing him a free slice of pie on the way out. The next stop was the clubhouse bar, not for drinks, but for darts. Eli watched, fascinated, as Rafe hit bullseye after bullseye, his movements sharp and calm. Then Rafe handed him a dart. Go on. Let's see what you got. Eli squinted, tongue sticking out in concentration, and threw. He missed completely, landing in the wall nowhere near the board. The men erupted in laughter. Hey, Tank said, that's one of Ghost's best shots. Not bad for a first try. Rafe said, try again. Don't aim at the board. Aim through it. The boy frowned, focused, and this time, the dart hit the edge of the board. He turned around, triumphant. See, I'm improving. Rafe ruffled his hair. That's how it starts. Nobody's good at anything until they believe they can be. The other stared. Ghost, the same man who once broke a poke cue over a rival's head, was giving fatherly advice. Slim whispered to Tank, he's either losing his mind or growing his soul. Tank smirked. Hell, maybe both. By sunset, the day had shifted from novelty to something real. They took Eli to the edge of town, where an old quarry looked out over the valley. The sky was streaked in orange and violet, the air heavy with that strange stillness that comes before the stars wake. Rafe sat beside Eli on a rock, their silhouettes cut against the burning horizon. You ever had a dad? Kid, Rafe asked quietly. Eli shook his head. Mom said I didn't need one. She said some dads leave, and some don't know how to stay. Rafe stared at the horizon for a long moment. She's right. Eli turned to him. Were you a dad before? The question hit like a bullet. He didn't see coming. Rafe's throat tightened. He thought of a woman's face, a tiny pair of shoes, a car wrecked on a rain-slicked highway. Ago, he pushed it down. No, he said finally. Not the way it counts. Eli nodded, as if he understood something deeper than his age should allow. That's okay. You're doing good for a first day. Rafe laughed softly. That's so. Yeah, you listen. Most grown-ups don't. For the second time that day, Rafe found himself unable to speak. But the peace didn't last long. It happened while Eli was showing Slim how to skip stones across the quarry water. The boys mentioned something offhand, like it didn't mean much. Mom said the man in suits would find her again. Rafe froze mid-drag of his cigarette. What man in suits? Eli frowned, thinking, the ones from the van. They came to the clinic once. Mom said they worked for the company she used to work for before she started helping people who didn't pay. Hank glanced at Rafe. Company. What kind of company? Eli shrugged. They said something about shipments. Mom said they were lying. She said people were disappearing because of it. Rafe's stomach turned cold. He'd heard whispers about medical shipments being used as cover for human cargo, the kind of thing only devils and suits could pull off. He crouched down to Ellie's level. Do you remember anything else? License plates? Names? Eli hesitated. She said if she ever went missing, to tell you they took her because she knew. Silence. Slim cursed under his breath. Jesus, ghosts. That ain't no accident. Rafe's eyes hardened. The warmth of the day drained from him, replaced by the old, familiar burn of purpose. That night, when Eli finally fell asleep again, in the clubhouse, curled up in Rafe's leather jacket, the men gathered around the table. Hank poured a drink. So what's the move? Rafe laid Mare's photograph down on the wood. We find her. Slim leaned forward. You don't even know where to start. Rafe opened his phone. I know someone who does. He dialed her. Number. An old contact named Lena Vega. An ex-hacker turned mechanic who owed him a favor big enough to choke on. Need a trace. He said, name's Mara Kellen. Last cell pin. Last week. Send whatever you get. Lena didn't ask questions. She knew better. 10 minutes later, Rafe's phone buzzed. A single line of text appeared. Last known location, abandoned chemical plant, Highway 47. Slim exhaled. You gotta be kidding me. That place is poisoned. Literally. Hank looked at Rafe. You think she's still alive? Rafe didn't answer. He just stared at the glowing coordinates. She saved me when no one else would. He said finally, now her kid's sleeping under my roof. I'm not letting her vanish. He stepped outside. The night wind carried sand across the road, whispering through the bones of the desert. The sky was endless and indifferent, the stars watching without judgment. Behind him, Eli stirred in his sleep, murmuring softly. Rafe paused at the doorway, glancing back at the boy, small, fragile, clutching his jacket like a promise. He whispered to himself, one day, the words tasted strange. A promise turned into a mission. Rafe swung a leg over his bike, the engine rolling the lights. The others followed without question. Helmets snapping on, headlights cutting through the dark like the eyes of steel beams. The one-day dad had found his purpose God in the desert night. The angels rode again, not for vengeance, not for brotherhood, but for something they'd forgotten how to believe in. Hope. The desert night burned red, not with fire, not yet, but with the kind of light that makes the horizon look like a wound. Late Ghost Donovan sat astride his Harley, helmet off, eyes fixed on the distant silhouette of the old ridgeline chemical plant. The place looked abandoned, rusted towers, broken glass, the faint pulse of floodlights that shouldn't have been on. But Rafe could feel it, movement inside, engines humming, people who didn't belong. The others waited in silence behind him. 12 men in leather and steel, their bikes lined up like war horses, breath steaming in the cool desert air. None of them asked questions.
They didn't need to. When Ghost gave a look like that, a still, heavy look, it meant something sacred was about to happen. Hank finally broke the silence. You sure she's in there? Boss, Rafe checked his phone. The tracker Lena sent posted in one last location. She's there. Or she was. Slim spat into the dirt. And what about the kid? Rafe turned toward the van parked a few yards behind. Through the cracked window, Eli peered out, his small face paled in the glow of the dashboard. The boy had insisted on coming, had looked Rafe dead in the eye and said, "You can't find her without me." Rafe wanted to tell him no, to lock him away from all this, but something in Ellie's stare was too much like Mara's. Stubborn, unbreakable dot, he walked over to the van, crouched by the door. "You stay put, understand, no matter what happens." Eli nodded, but his hands were trembling. "You'll bring her back." Rafe placed a gloved hand over the boys. "That's the only plan I've got." For a second, their eyes locked. Father for a day, and son for a lifetime. Then Rafe stood, pulled his helmet on, and swung back onto his bike. The Angels started their engines. The sound rolled through the valley like thunder. And then they rode. The chemical plant loomed larger with every second. Floodlights cut through the dark, sweeping across the sand. The scent of fuel and rock grew stronger. Rafe raised his hand, signaling the formation. They split into pairs, ghostly figures weaving through the shadows. The gate came into view, rusted chain link, guarded by men like tactical gear, rifles slung low. Government issue, not cops, not marked, something worse, official ghosts. Slim whispered through the calm, "You want to knock or crash the party?" Rafe revved his engine once. With a damn door, he twisted the throttle. The Harleys roared forward, engines howling, headlights flaring like comets. The guards barely had time to aim before the first gate exploded inward, steel shrieking under the weight of vengeance. What followed wasn't chaos. It was purpose-wearing leather, and smoke got the Angels surged through the yard, tires spinning fire off the gravel. Gunfire erupted. Sparks lit the night. One bike went down, sliding across the concrete, but the others pushed through, roaring, relentless. Rafe was the first inside. He shot past the loading bay, bullets pinging off his handlebars, and skidded behind a concrete pillar. He drew his pistol, heavy, old, and personal, and returned fire with calm precision. Beside him, Tank shouted, "You see her?" Rafe pointed upward, toward the second floor of the processing tower, where a faint light flickered through broken glass. A shadow moved behind it, slender, restrained Mara dot inside the plant. The air was poisoned, the floor slick with chemical residue, walls lined with old pipes that hummed with a ghostly pulse. The mercenaries were destroying evidence, boxes of medical supplies, vials, paper stamped with government seals dot in the middle of it all. Tied to a chair was Mara Kellen. Her face was bruised, her uniform torn, but her eyes, when they met Rafe through the shattered glass, were steady. He didn't hesitate. Tank, pick left flank. Slim, smoked the exits. They moved like a storm. Grenades clattered, smoke hissed, gunfire flared. Rafe sprinted up the stairs two at a time, boots pounding metal. Every bullet that missed felt like borrowed grace dot when he reached the top. One of the marks turned to lake. Rafe's fist met his jaw, sending him through a window. Another raised the rifle. Rafe slammed the butt of his gun into the man's throat, grabbed him by the vest, and used him as a shield as the others fired. He reached Mare's chair and cut the ropes with a knife. Her wrists were raw, her breath uneven. Took him long enough. She rasped out. Rafe managed to smirk. Had to get the bike washed first. She tried to stand but stumbled. He caught her, steadying her with an arm around her waist. "You shouldn't have come," she whispered. "Kid gave me no choice." Her eyes widened. "Ellie's here, safe for now. Then you need to go. They'll kill you." Rafe's voice hardened. "They'll try." Down below, the fight had turned into hellfire. Flames leapt from leaking barrels, smoke swallowing the catwalk. The Angels held the line, outnumbered but unbroken. They fought not for turf, not for pride, but for something cleaner. One woman's life. Tank roared over the gunfire, dragging Slim out from behind a crate. "We're getting cooked here, boss. 2 minutes." Rafe shouted, lifting Mara into his arms dot as he carried her down the stairwell. Bullets whizzed past. One grazed his shoulder, white paint flashing through his body, but he kept moving. He'd been hit before. Pain was just an old friend with bad timing.
When he burst through the side door, the air hit like a wave of freedom, hot, acrid, alive. He half ran, half stumbled toward the Van Dot. Eli saw them first. He threw the door open and ran toward them, tears blurring his vision. Mom, Mara's voice cracked. Baby, Rafe set her down, and she dropped to her knees, pulling Eli into her arms. The boy sobbed into her chest, her hands gripping his hair, his face. As if to make sure he was real, Rafe turned away, giving them a moment that felt holy. But the world wasn't done with them yet. A shout came from the plant, the surviving agents regrouping. Floodlights blazed back to life, illuminating the angels in the open yard. Tank cursed. We're pinned. Rafe spun, eyes scanning for cover. Then, the faintest rumble. Distant, with growing dot engines dot dozens of them. Headlights crested the ridge. A line of bikes descending through the dust like a second storm. Logos glinted under the moonlight. Nomads, reapers, wolves, even the sons of dust, rival chapters, men who swore never to ride with the Ridgefall Angels again. But Rafe had made the call, and they'd answered. The mercenaries hesitated, realizing the late that the desert had turned against them. The newcomers roared into the lot, forming a circle round the plant. Engines howled, horns bled, a symphony of rebellion. Rafe stepped forward, blood on his sleeve, fire in his eyes. This is our town, he shouted, and she's under our protection. The first shot cracked, then another, and then the desert became thunder. Bikes charged, flames rose. The ground shook with fury and fate. Rafe's world became motion, muzzle flash, spinning chrome, shouts drowned by engines. Through it all, Eli clung to his mother inside the van, watching his one-day father ride through the inferno. The reflection of fire danced in his eyes, half terror, half awe. He whispered, "Please come back." The battle didn't last long, but it felt like eternity. When the smoke began to clear, the plant was collapsing, flames licking up the walls, metal shrieking under its own heat. The mercenaries were either dead, gone, or swallowed by the blaze. Rafe limped back toward the van, foot streaked and bleeding, but still standing. Mara opened the door, tears streaking down her face. "You're hurt." He shook his head. "Just a scratch." Eli launched forward, wrapping his arms around him. "You did it. You saved her." Rafe froze, then slowly hugged the boy back, one arm around the small shoulder, the other gripping his jacket like an anchor. For the first time in years, his chest didn't feel hollow. Behind them, the angels watched in silence. Even Slim wiped his face, muttering, "Damn dust in the air." Tank chuckled softly. "Dust. My ass." By the time sirens began wailing miles away, the night was nearly over. The rival bikers were already disappearing into the desert. Engines fading into Legend Dot, the Ridgefall Angels loaded what they could into their trucks. Medical files, stolen drives, proof that Mara had been right all along. Rafe looked back at the burning plant, the fire reflecting in his eyes. She was never just a nurse. He said quietly, "She was trying to stop something bigger." Mara touched his arm. "You didn't have to save me." He met her gaze. "Yeah, I did." She smiled faintly. "I told Eli to find the man with the skull tattoo. I knew you'd still have a soul under there somewhere." He gave a small, tired laugh. "Don't spread that around. I've got a reputation to keep." Eli leaned against him, eyes half closed, the exhaustion of the night finally catching up. "You can be my dad for more than one day now, right?" Rafe hesitated, then nodded. "Yeah, kid, I think I can manage that." As dawn broke, the desert was quiet again. Smoke curled into the sunrise. The angels stood beside their bikes, faces lit by gold and ash. They weren't heroes, not in the world's eyes, but that night, they'd done what no law ever could. They'd saved one of their own, not because they had to, but because it was right dot and for a man named Ghost. That was enough. He started his bike, the roar echoing across the canyon, and the angels followed him home, leaving the high five, memory, and the first trace of redemption in a long, long time. The desert had gone silent again, got no engines, no shouts, no gunfire, only the hiss of cooling metal and the soft crackle of what was left of the ridgeline chemical plant. By sunrise, the fire was dying, leaving behind blackened skeletons of steel and the acrid perfume of smoke. The sirens were still miles away, distant, but sinister, late as always. The law would come eventually, the late to matter, too early for anyone to care. Rafe Ghost Donovan stood by his Harley, watching the smoke twist into the pale light. His cut, the angel skull embroidered across his back, was singed, torn along one shoulder. Blood had dried across his collarbone. His hands were shaking, not from fear, but from the weight of still being alive. He took one last look at the plant. Then he turned his back toward home. The Ridgefall Angels clubhouse sat at the edge of town, half saloon, half sanctuary. By morning, the place smelled of whiskey and antiseptics. Mara's doing inside. The men moved like ghosts themselves. No one spoke much. They were bandaging wounds, cleaning weapons, pouring coffee like pennies. The adrenaline had burned off hours ago, leaving only exhaustion and a strain. Something quiet they didn't know what to do with. Ray pushed open the office door, and there she was, Doc Mara, God alive. Doc, she sat on the old leather couch, wrapped in a blanket too big for her, sunlight pooling over her bruised face. Her hair was still damp from a makeshift wash. Her wrists wrapped in gauze. Eli slept beside her, curled up under her arm. A small patch of peace in a world that really offered any. For a long moment, Rafe just stood there, afraid that moving would make it vanish. Doc Mara noticed him and smiled faintly. "You look worse than me," he smirked. "You should see the other guys." Her eyes softened. "I did." He crossed the room and sat opposite her, leaning forward with his elbows on his knees. The floor between them held so much history, fears, regrets, things unsaid. "You remember that night?" she asked quietly. "The highway outside Santa Fe? How could I forget?" He said, "You pulled a bullet out of me with a pair of tweezers and half a bottle of tequila. You screamed. I grunted. You begged me to knock you out." He allowed himself a ghost of a smile. Semantics. They both laughed softly, a sound that felt like breathing after drowning. Then Mara's expression changed, the humor dimming. "When I saw what they were doing, moving people like cargo under medical cover, I knew I couldn't stop it alone. They had government clearance, ghost accounts, shell clinics. When I found out they'd used my name to move one of the shipments, I ran. I knew they'd come for me." Rafe's jaw tightened. "And you sent the boy to find me?" She nodded. "I told him to find the man with the skull tattoo. I didn't know if he'd still be alive, but if you were, I knew you'd protect him." Rafe leaned back, eyes distant. "You put a lot of faith in a man like me." "No," Laura said softly. "I put faith in the man I knew you were, the one who took a bullet for his brother and still apologized to the cop who shot him. You're not a bad man, Rafe. You just forgot how to be a good one. That landed like a punch he didn't dodge." He looked down, rubbing his knuckles. The same hands that had killed, protected, built, broken. "Maybe," he murmured, "but I didn't forget what that feels like. You don't owe me anything." "Yeah," he said, meeting her eyes. "I do." Eli stirred on the couch, mumbling in his sleep before blinking awake. He saw Rafe and smiled the kind of smile that could split the hardest armor. "You didn't leave." Rafe shook his head. "Not my style." The boy sat up, hair sticking up, still holding the crumpled photograph, the one he carried all the way through the desert. He looked at it for a long time before handing it to Rafe. This time, Eli said, "Boy small, but certain. It's for you to keep." Rafe took it carefully, like it might break. The photo was worn, edges curled, Mara in her nurse's uniform, smiling at something outside the frame. A little handprint smudged the corner. He wanted to say something, "Thank you," maybe, but the words jammed in his throat. Instead, he reached out and ruffled the boy's hair. "You did good, kid." Eli grinned. "Mom says you don't smile much." "She's right." "Then I'll make you." Rafe blinked. "Oh yeah?" The boy nodded solemnly. "You're my dad now, at least for one more breakfast." Something in the room cracked. Not loud, not visible. Just the sound of a heart remembering how to beat. Don Mara watched them quietly, her eyes glassy. She didn't interrupt. She knew what this was, a small miracle stitched out of ruin. They all ate together at the bar, pancakes again, because Eli insisted. The men pretended to complain, and none of them did. Tank flipped the griddle. Slim found a bottle of syrup, and even Stone, who never smiled at anything human, cut his pancakes into neat triangles for the kid Doc. It was the strangest sight Ridgefall had ever seen. A table of leather-clad killers were laughing softly at a child's joke Doc when Eli spilled his milk. Rafe reached over without thinking, wiping it up with a rag. The gesture was simple, but it stopped Mara cold. For one fleeting second, he looked like a father, not a stand-in, not a savior, just a man who cared. Doc Eli climbed into his lap mid-breakfast, content as a cat. "You smell like smoke," he said. Rafe chuckled. "Better than motor oil." The boy grinned. "You smell like both." The laughter that followed wasn't forced. It was real, fragile, but arrived out by mid-morning, the safe car arrived. A rusted station wagon driven by one of Mayor's old friends from the clinic network. They lay low, head east, find another name, another star. Eli didn't like it. He clung to Rafe's jacket, eyes filling with tears he didn't want anyone to see. Can't we stay? Just for a while? Mara crouched beside him. Sweetheart, we can't, but we'll be okay, and he'll be right here. Eli turned to Rafe. You promise? Rafe, no. Me and him eye to eye. Yeah. You ever need me, you come back to Ridgefall. The angels don't forget family. The boy nodded, biting his lip. You'll keep the picture, right? Rafe smiled, quiet and sad, always. And then Eli did something that broke him clean in two. She hugged him, tight, desperate, and whispered, "Bye, Dad." The word hit Rafe like shrapnel. Not because it was loud, because it was true. He didn't cry, couldn't. But something inside him cracked open, a rusted lock finally giving way. He put a hand on the back of the boy's head, holding him for a moment longer than necessary, memorizing the weight of the small body against his chest. When Mara came to take Ellie's hand, she paused, her gaze meeting Rafe's one last time. There was gratitude there, and something else, a quiet understanding between the people who survived the same darkness, had found a fragment of light in it. Take care of yourself, Ghost, she said softly. He almost laughed. Not likely, but she smiled anyway. Try. When the car finally disappeared down the dirt road, the clubhouse fell into stillness again. The angels lingered outside, watching the dust trail fade into the horizon. Tank clapped Rafe on the shoulder. You good, boss? Rafe didn't answer. He just stared at the empty road. Slim lit a cigarette, exhaling slow. Never thought I'd see the day we went all hero for a nurse and her kid. Tank grinned. Ain't every day we get called angels for real. Rafe gave a quiet laugh. Don't get used to it. But deep down, he knew something had shifted in all of them. They fought for more than pride or territory. They fought for meeting Dot and for one night. At least, they found it later. Rafe sat alone on the clubhouse steps, the dessert wind tugging at his jacket. The sun was higher now, slicing through the smoke. He reached into his pocket and pulled out the photograph, creased, stained, still warm from his hand. He studied it for a long time. Mary smiled. The faint background of a hospital ward, and there, barely visible in the corner, a boy's reflection in the glass behind her. He traced it with his thumb dot ghost. That was what they called him, because he lived through too many things that should have killed him. But sitting there, watching the day unfold, he realized something he never had before. He wasn't a ghost anymore. He was a man with something worth remembering. That night, Ridgefall slept easier. Word spread through the bars and truck stops, whispers of the angels of fire, the outlaws who rode through hell to save a woman and her child. No one could prove it. The cops wrote it off as a chemical accident. The government files disappeared like dust. But the people remembered. They remembered the roar of engines in the dark. They remembered the fire that looked like wings. And they remembered the man who'd once been nothing until a little boy called him Dad. Rafe didn't keep the photo in his wallet. He kept it taped to the mirror behind the bar, where the morning light always hit it first. Every sunrise after that, he'd look at it once before the day began, a small, private reminder that even men like him could have one good thing they didn't destroy. He'd never say it aloud, but the others could tell. Something had changed in their leader. His voice was quieter now. His temper, shorter with fools, but softer with brothers. And sometimes, when a lost kid wandered close to the wrong crowd, Rafe would find him a job sweeping the floor or fixing bikes. Maybe it was nothing. Maybe it was everything died, and so the legend of Ridgefall grew, not written in paper, but whispered on the wind about the night the outlaws became angels. Not because they followed the law, but because they followed their hearts. And somewhere out on a long desert highway, a boy in the back seat of a station wagon pressed his forehead to the window, watching the road stretch behind him. He smiled and whispered, "Ride safe, Dad." The boy couldn't have been more than 8, barefoot, clutching a torn backpack. He stood at the edge of the biker lot, a world of roaring engines and leather vests that smelled of oil and smoke. When he spoke, his voice was too steady for someone that small. He wanted you. Be my dad for just one day? After that followed wasn't cruel, just confused. Until the club president killed his engine, stepped off his Harley, and asked, Who sent you? Kid. The answer froze every man there. My mom. He said. She said you over the rope slow, as if it didn't want to. A pale orange sun pushed through a wall of dust, painting the town of Ridgefall in the color of rust and regret. Wind carried the scent of gasoline, dry earth, and old whiskey, the perfume of the forgotten. Out on the edge of town, beyond the cracked highway signs and the junkyard, stood the Hells Angels clubhouse, a squat, corrugated metal building that looked more like a failed mechanic's shop than the headquarters of an outlaw chapter. The walls were scarred with graffiti, the parking lot littered with cigarette butts, busted beer bottles, and sleeping motorcycles that still ticked faintly from the heat of last night's ride out inside. The aftermath of a party hummed thick in the air. A radio played somewhere, a lazy blues riff barely audible beneath the sound of snoring men and creaking furniture. A few bikers lay passed out on the floor, patches gleaming under the neon light. Ridgefall chapter, Angels Till Death. The pool table was covered in playing cards, dollar bills, and a half-empty bottle of Jack that had long since gone warm. At the far end of the room, behind a scarred oak desk, sat Rafe Ghost Donovan, 40-something, built like a man who'd been through more fights than conversation. Tattoos ran down his arms like dark veins, most notably, the one on his right forearm, a grinning skull wreathed in smoke. He was cleaning his gun, quiet and methodical, as dawn leaked through the blinds. The others knew better than to disturb him during these hours, the silence before the day's noise. The ritual that kept his demons at bay. Rafe was the kind of man who didn't believe in second chances. But life, cruel and strange as it was, had decided to give him one anyway, whether he wanted it or not. Outside, a dust storm was trying to rise. Little swirls spinning across the parking lot. The only movement came from a small figure walking down the empty road. A boy, maybe 8 years old, wearing sneakers held together with duct tape and a too-big hoodie that used to be red but now looked more like the dessert itself. He clutched something in his hands, a creased photograph, and walked with a purpose that didn't belong to him. Someone his size out when he reached the clubhouse gate. He stopped. The sign above read private property trespassers will bleed. He hesitated, swallowed, and then did something brave and foolish at once. He walked right inside. A biker named Tank, a mountain of a man with a beard like roadkill and a heart he didn't admit. He had spotted him first. Hey, what the hell? The boy froze. He looked around at the bikes, the men, the chaos, and for a moment, it was clear he was scared out of his mind. I'm looking for someone, he said. Tank frowned. Kid, this ain't no church. You lost. The boy shook his head, gripping the photograph tighter. My mom said, to find the man with the skull tattoo. That got their attention. A few men exchanged worried looks. Others laughed, thinking it a prank. One of them, a weary biker named Slim, leaned forward from the couch, a cigarette dangling from his mouth. Well, ain't that cute? Slim said, we got ourselves a scavenger hunt. You hear that, Ghost? Kids looking for your ugly mug. Rafe didn't look up. Tell him to keep walking. But the boy took a few steps closer, his shoes scraping the concrete. He held out the photograph, shaky but determined. Please, sir, my mom said you helped. She said you owe her a life. That stopped everything. Even the radio went silent. Rafe finally lifted his eyes. He saw a boy with dirt-streaked cheeks, hair that hadn't seen a comb in weeks, and eyes as serious for his age. The picture in his hand was old, bent, creased, but clear enough. A woman in a nurse's uniform, smiling softly at the camera. On the back, written in fake blue, was a name, Mara. Rafe's jaw tightened. For the first time in years, he forgot to breathe. The room blurred for a moment, replaced by a memory, asphalt under his back, headlights spinning, the taste of iron and blood in his mouth. He'd been shot twice that night, ambushed by a rival crew out on Highway 19. He remembered the sound of engines fading, his brother scattered, and the cold certainty that he wasn't getting up again. Then, the crunch of tires. Hey Van, the woman's voice. Stay with me, Rafe. You hear me? You don't die tonight. He remembered her hands, steady and warm despite the chaos, cutting open his vest, pulling the bullet from his shoulder with nothing but a pair of pliers and pure stubbornness. He tried to tell her to leave, but they'd come back, but she didn't. When he woke up in a hospital bed 2 days later, she was gone. No name, no record, just a ghost who'd saved a ghost. Now her son stood in front of him. Rafe stood slowly, his chair scraping the floor. The boy flinched but didn't back away. "What's your name?" Rafe asked. "Eli." "And where's your mom now?" The boy hesitated, his lower lip trembling. I don't know. She told me to find you. She said, if she didn't come back, you make sure I was safe." A murmur rippled through the room. Rafe's expression didn't change, but his fingers curled into fists. "She didn't come back from where?" Ellie's voice broke when he spoke. "Some men came. They had guns. She told me to run." Hank knelt down beside the boy, his gravelly voice softened now. "What kind of men?" Eli shook his head. "I don't know. They had black cars, and one of them said something about the shipment." Rafe exchanged a look with Slim, the kind that said this isn't random. Ridgefall was full of dirty deals and missing people, but this smelled different. They got the kids some water and a sandwich. He ate like he hadn't seen food in days. Between bites, he told them fragments of his stories, how they moved from town to town, how his mom worked in clinics and shelters, patching up addicts and drifters for free. She said people don't need heroes. He said quietly, they just need someone who doesn't walk away. That line hit Rafe harder than the whiskey ever could. He studied the boy while the others pretended not to. There was a small scar on Ellie's arm, clean, old, surgical. The kind of scar left by someone who knew how to treat wounds. "Your mom do that?" Rafe asked. Doc. Eli nodded. "She said I fell off a bike, but I think she lied. She always lied when she wanted to protect me." Rafe looked away, swallowing hard. Mara had been like that type, fearless on the outside, breaking on the insides out by noon. The clubhouse felt smaller, as if the walls were closing. Slim wanted to take the boy to the sheriff. Hank argued that wasn't safe. Ridgefall's cops were more loyal to caste than conscience. Rafe said nothing for a long time. He just stared at the photograph, thumb tracing the edges like it might give him answers. Finally, he stood and walked toward the boy. "You said your mom told you to find the man with the skull tattoo." Rafe said. Eli nodded. "Why?" "She said you owed her a life." Rafe crouched so they were eye level. "You know what that means, kid." Eli met his gaze, unflinching. "It means you're supposed to save someone, and now it's my turn." Something in that answer, innocent, brutal, true, cracked something open in Rafe he hadn't felt in years. That night, after the others drifted out, Rafe sat alone in the garage. The boy was asleep on a couch, a blanket too big for him pulled up to his chin. Rafe smoked in silence, staring at the skull tattoo on his arm. The desert wind rattled the windows, carrying echoes of the past, the sound of gunfire, a woman's voice saying, "You don't die tonight." He pulled out his old photograph, the one he swore he'd never open again. Inside were the ghosts of another life, patches from fallen brothers, his parole papers, and a blood-stained piece of cloth from a night he almost died. And tucked inside the cloth, a name written on the back of a clinic card, Mara Kellen. He'd never gone looking for her. Maybe he'd been afraid to. Maybe he thought he didn't deserve to. But now her son was sleeping under his roof. If she was out there somewhere, in danger, maybe worse. Rafe crushed out his cigarette and stood. His reflection in the window looked older than it should have, but his eyes were alive again, sharp, focused, and filled with a purpose he hadn't felt in a decade. He turned to Tank, who'd been quietly watching from the doorway. "If the boys," Rafe said, "we're gonna find her." Tank raised an eyebrow. "You sure about that? Could be a trap." Rafe's voice was low, steady. "Don't care. That woman saved my life once. I ain't letting her slip away." He looked toward the couch, where Eli stirred in his sleep, murmuring his mother's name. Besides, Rafe added quietly, he had already lost enough. By the time the engines roared to life outside, the desert was dark again, and the ghost of Ridgefall were awake. Rafe didn't know yet what he was riding into, or how deep the trouble ran. All he knew was this: the woman who once refused to let him die had sent her son to him for a reason, and for the first time in years, the outlaw known as Ghost Donovan felt like he might be about to live for something, or someone, that actually mattered. The morning started with the sound of engines, a low, steady rumble that seemed to shake the desert away. Rafe Ghost Donovan stood beside his Harley, watching the sun climb over Ridgefall. The light caught on the chrome, on the cracked asphalt, on the dust that never seemed to settle. Here, he wasn't used to mornings that felt this quiet or this strange. A kid was sleeping on his clubhouse couch, a kid who called him Dad. even if just for one day. When Eli woke, he blinked like someone who didn't quite trust that the world was still here. Rafe handed him a mug of cocoa, dark, no sugar, the only kind they had, and a breakfast sandwich wrapped in foil. The boy held it with both hands. "You made this." "Not exactly," Rafe said, half grinning. "Tank burned it. I rescued it. Team effort." Eli laughed softly, a sound that startled the room. The other bikers froze mid-argument, like they just heard something rare and delicate. It was the first time any of them had seen Rafe smile, without whiskey behind it. Later that morning, the kids' wish came up again, half a joke, half a dare. "You really said you wanted one of us to be your dad for a day?" Slim asked. Leaning against his bike, Eli nodded. "Yeah, just one day. That's what Mom said to ask for." Rafe gave him a curious look. "Why one day?" Eli thought about it. "She said one day's enough to see who someone really is." That shut Slim up. Rafe figured there was no harm in it. The kid needed distraction, and maybe, if he was honest, so did he. So he told the boys to clear their schedules. No business, no runs, no fights, just one clean day. They didn't understand why their leader suddenly cared about a stray, but none dared argue. They followed Rafe because, when he gave an order, it was never random. Tank handed Eli a helmet. "All right, little man, you ever been on a Harley before?" Ellie's eyes went wide. "No, sir."
Just one clean day. They didn't understand why their leader suddenly cared about a stray, but none dared argue. They followed Rafe because, when he gave an order, it was never
random. The open road dot, the wind hit Ellie's face like freedom itself. He sat in front of Rafe, tiny hands gripping the handlebars that he couldn't really reach.
One clean day, sir. They didn't understand why their leader suddenly cared about a stray, but none dared argue that. They followed Rafe because, when he gave an order, it was never
rifling close so the boy could hear him over the roar. "Breathe it in, kids. That's what freedom smells like. It smells like oil and bugs," Eli shouted.
One clean day, sir. They didn't understand why their leader suddenly cared about a stray, but none dared argue that. They followed Rafe because, when he gave an order, it was never
roadside diner. Betty's Pancake House, a faded sign hanging by one chain. The kind of place that still served coffee in chipped mugs and butter in foil packets.
One clean day, sir. They didn't understand why the leader suddenly cared about a stray, but none dared argue that. They followed Rafe because, when he gave an order, it was never random.
Eli shrugged. "We used to move around a lot. Mom said never to waste food, because you don't know when you'll eat again." Rafe nodded quietly, cutting another pancake.
One clean day, sir. They didn't understand why the leader suddenly cared about a stray, but none dared argue that. They followed Rafe because, when he gave an order, it was never
That's what happens when you eat raised by wolves. Speak for yourself. Tank shot back. Eli giggled again, and for a while, that sound filled the diner better than any jukebox ever could. Even the waitress smiled, handing him a fruit slice of pie on the way out. The next stop was the clubhouse bar. For dark, Eli watched, fascinated, as Rafe hit bullseye after bullseye, his movements sharp and calm. Then Rafe handed him a dart. "Go on. Let's see what you got." Eli screamed, tongue sticking out of constipation, and threw. He missed completely, landing in the wall nowhere near the boy. The men erupted in laughter. "Hey," Tank said, "that's one of Ghost's best shots. Not bad for a first try." Rafe said, "Try again. Don't aim at the boy. Aim through it." The boy's sound, focused, predictable. The dart hit the edge of the boy. He turned around, triumphant. "See, I'm improving." Rafe ruffled his hair. "That's how it starts. Nobody's good at anything until they believe they can be." The other stared. Ghost, the same man who once broke a pool cue over a rival's head, was giving fatherly advice. Slim whispered to Tank, "He's either losing his mind or growing a soul." Tank smirked. "Hell, maybe both. By sunset, the day had shifted from novelty to something real. They took Eli to the edge of town, where an old quarry looked out over the valley. The sky was streaked in orange and violet, the air heavy with that strange stillness that comes before the stars wake. Rafe sat beside Eli on a rock, their silhouettes cut against the burning horizon. "You ever had a dad, kid?" Rafe asked quietly. Eli shook his head.
"That's how it
Mom
starts.
Said I didn't need
Nobody's
one.
good at
She
anything until they believe they
Some
can."
don't know how to stay. Rafe stared at the horizon for a long moment. "She's right."
Over a rival's head was giving fatherly advice. Slim whispered to Tank,
"He's coming." Rafe's throat tightened. He thought of a woman's face, a tiny pair of shoes, a car wreck on a race.
They're losing his mind or growing a soul. Tank smirked. Hell, no. Maybe.
He said finally. Not the way it counts. Eli nodded, as if he understood something deeper and his own shit aloud. That's okay. You're doing good for a first day. Rafe laughed softly. That's so. Yeah.
Heavy with that strange stillness that comes before the stars wake. Rafe sat beside Eli on a rock, their silhouettes cut against the burning horizon. You ever had a dad? Kid, Rafe asked. That's how it starts. Nobody's good at anything until they believe they can.
Mom said the man in suits would find her again. Rafe froze mid-drag of his
over a rival's head was giving fatherly advice. Slim whispered to Tank, "He's coming." Rafe's throat tightened. He thought of a woman's face, a tiny pair of shoes, a car wreck on a either losing his mind or growing his soul. Tank smirked. Hell, no. Maybe.
What kind of company? Eli shrugged. They said something about shipment. Mom said they were lying. She said people were disappearing because of it. Rafe's stomach turned cold. He heard whispers about medical shipment.
Heavy with that strange stillness that comes before the stars wake. Rafe sat beside Eli on a rock, their silhouettes cut against the burning horizon. You ever had a dad? Eli was kid. Rafe asked.
Names Eli hesitated.
That's how it starts. Nobody's good at anything until they believe they can.
Silence. Slim cursed under his breath. Jesus, ghost.
Over a rival's head was giving fatherly advice. Slim whispered to Tank, "He's coming." Rafe's throat tightened. He thought of a woman's face, a tiny pair of shoes, a car wreck on a either losing his mind or growing his soul. Tank smirked. Hell, no. Maybe.
Tank poured a drink. So what's the move? Rafe laid Mayor's photograph down on the wood. We find her. Slim leaned forward. We don't even know where to start. Rafe opened his phone. I know someone who does.
Heavy with that strange stillness that comes before the stars wake. Rafe sat beside Eli on a rock, their silhouettes cut against the burning horizon. You ever had a dad? Eli was kid. Rafe asked.
Last selfie.
That's how it starts. Nobody's good at anything until they believe they can.
Better. 10 minutes later, Rafe's phone buzzed. A single line of text appeared.
For a rival's head was giving fatherly advice. Slim whispered to Tank, "He's coming." Came to the Rafe's throat tightened. He thought of a woman's face, a tiny pair of shoes, a car wreck on a either losing his mind or growing his soul. Tank smirked. Hell, no. Maybe.
She saved me when no one else would. She said finally, now her kid's sleeping under my room. I'm not letting her vanish. She stepped outside. The night wind carried sand across the road.
Heavy with that strange stillness that comes before the stars wake. Rafe sat beside Eli on a rock, their silhouettes cut against the burning horizon. You ever had a dad? Eli was kid. Rafe asked.
Glancing back at the boy,
that's how it starts. Nobody's good at anything until they believe they can.
He whispered to himself, one day, the words tasted strange. A promise turned into
for a rival's head was giving fatherly advice. Slim whispered to Tank, "He's coming." Came to Rafe's throat tightened. He thought of a woman's face, a tiny pair of shoes, a car wreck on a either losing his mind or growing his soul. Tank smirked. Hell, no. Maybe.
Road again. Not for vengeance, not for brotherhood, but for something they've forgotten how to believe in. Hope. Because her night burned red. Not with fire, not yet, but with the kind of light that makes the horizon look like a line. They comes before the stars wake.
Rafe sat beside Eli on a rock, their silhouettes cut against the burning horizon. You ever had a dad? Eli was kid. Rafe asked.
Broken glass.
That's how it starts. Nobody's good at anything until they believe they can.
Movement inside. Engines humming. People who didn't belong. The others waited in silence behind him. 12 men in leather speed. Their bikes lined up like war horses. Pressed through them, they pulled the hose over. None of them had special. Oh, didn't need to. And those kids looked like that. Square. Doesn't look. They knew something sacred was about to happen. Tank finally broke the silence. You said she's in there. Boss, Rafe checked his phone. The tracker unit sent pulses to one last location. She's there. Or she was. Slim back into the door. What about the kid? Rafe turned toward the van parked a few yards behind. Through the cracked window, Eli peered out. A small face there in the glow of the dashboard. The boy had insisted on coming. I looked Rafe dead in the eye and said, "You can't find her without me." Rafe wanted to tell him no, to lock him away from all this. But something in Ellie's sound was too much like Mary, stubborn, unbreakable dot, he walked over to the room, crouched by the door. Stay put, understand, no matter what happens. Hang on, Marty. But his hands were trembling. You'll bring her back. Rafe placed a gloved hand over the boy. That's the only plan I got. For a second, their eyes locked. Father for a day and son for a lifetime. Then Rafe stood, pulled his helmet on, and swung back onto his bike. The Angels started their engine. The sound rolled through the valley like thunder. The waves, they rose. The chemical plant moved larger. Every second, floodlights cut through the dark, sweeping across the sand. A scent of fuel and rock grease from them. Rafe raised his hand, signaling the formation. They split into pairs, ghostly figures weaving through the shadows. The gate came into view, rusted chain links, guarded by men without tactical gear, rifles slung low. Government issue, not cops, not marks, trusted words, official ghosts, sling whispered through the palm. You want to knock or crash the party? Rafe revved his engine once. With a damn door, he twisted the throttle. The Harleys roared forward, engines howling, headlights flaring like comets. The guards barely had time to aim before the first group exploded inward, steel creaking under the weight of danger. What followed wasn't clear. He was purpose wearing leather, and smoke out the Angel surged through the yard, tires spinning fire off the gravel. Gunfire erupted. Sparks lit the night. One bike went down, sliding across the concrete, but the others pushed through, roaring, relentless. Rafe was the first inside. He shot past the loading bay, bullets pinging off his handlebar, and skidded behind a concrete pillar. He drew his pistol, had him up old and personal, and returned fire with strong precision. Beside him, Tank shouted, "You see him?" Rafe pointed upward, toward the second floor of the processing tower, where a faint light flickered through broken glass. A shadow moved behind it, slender, restrained Dot inside the plant. The air was poisoned. The floor slipped with chemical residue, walls lined with old pipes that hung with ghostly tape. The mercenaries were destroying everything. Boxes of medical supplies, vials, paper stamps with government seals died in the middle of it all. Tightly there was Mara Kelly. Her face was bruised, her uniform torn, but her eyes, when they met Rafe's through the shattered glass, were steady. He didn't hesitate. Tank, take left flank. Slam, smoke the exits. They moved like a storm. Grenades clattered, smoke hissed, gunfire flared. Rafe sprinted up the stairs two at a time, each time he met him. Every bullet that missed felt like borrowed Grace Dot when he reached the top. One of the marks turned to Rafe. Rafe's fist met his jaw, sending him through a window. Another raised the rifle. Rafe slammed the butt of his gun into the man's throat, grabbed him by the vest, and then pointed the shield as the other fired. He reached near his chair and cut the rope with the knife. Her wrists were raw, her breath uneven. Took him long enough. He rasped out Rafe's man's head. Had to get the bike washed first. She tried to stand but stumbled. He caught her, steadying her with an arm around her waist. "You shouldn't have come," he whispered. He gave me no choice. Her eyes widened. "Belly button, safe for now. When you need to go, they'll kill you." Rafe's voice hardened. They'll try. Down below, the fight had turned into hellfire. Flames leapt from leaking barrels, smoke swallowing the catwalk. The Angels held the line, outnumbered but unbroken. They fought not for turf, not for pride, but for something cleaner. One woman's life. Tank roared over the gunfire, dragging Slim out from behind a crate. "We're getting cooked here, boss. 2 minutes." Rafe shouted, lifting Mara into his arms back as he carried her down the stairwell. Bullets whizzed past. One grazed his shoulder, hard pain flashing through his body, but he kept moving. He'd been hit before. Pain was just an old friend with bad timing, and he burst through the side door. The air hit like a wave of freedom, hot, acrid, alive. He had friends. Half stumbled toward the Van Dot. Eli saw them first. He threw the door open and ran toward them, tears blurring his vision. "Mom." Mary's voice cracked. "Baby." Rafe set her down, and she dropped to her knees, pulling Eli into her arms. The boy sobbed into her chest, her hands gripping his hair, his face. As if to make sure he was real, Rafe turned away, giving them a moment that felt holy. But the world wasn't done with them yet. A step came from the plant. The surviving agents regrouping. Floodlights blazed back to life, illuminating the Angels in the open yard. Tank, we're pinned. Rafe spun, eyes scanning for cover. Then, the faintest rumble. Distant, a growing dot engine saw dozens of them. Headlights crested the ridge. A line of bikes descending through the dust like a second storm. Logos gleamed under the moonlight. No mask, squeakers, war. Even the sons of dust, rival captains, men who sworn never to ride with the Ridgefall Angels again. The Wraith had made the call, and they'd answered. The mercenaries hesitated. Realizing delayed that the desert had turned against them, the newcomers roared into the lot, forming a circle around the plane. Engines howled, horns flared, a symphony of rebellion. Wraith stepped forward, blood on his sleeve, fire in his eyes. This is our town, he shouted. The trees under our protection. The first shot cracked, then another, and then the desert became thunder. Bikes charged, flames rose, the ground shook with fury and fate. Wraith's world became motion, muzzle flash, spinning chrome, shouts drowned by engines. Through it all, Eli clung to his mother inside the van, watching his one-day father ride through the inferno. The reflection of fire dancing in his eyes, half terror, half awe. He whispered, "Please come back." The battle didn't last long, but it felt like eternity. When the smoke began to clear, the plant was collapsing, flames licking up the wall, metal shrieking under its own heat. The mercenaries were either dead, gone, or swallowed by the blaze. Wraith moved back toward the van, took streets and leaves, but still standing. Mara opened the door, tears streaking down her face. "You're hurt." He shook his head. "Just a scratch." Eli launched forward, wrapping his arms around him. "You did it. You saved her." Wraith froze, then slowly hugged the boy back, one arm around the small shoulder, the other gripping his jacket like an anklet. For the first time in years, his chest didn't feel hollow. Behind him, the angels watched in silence. Even Slim wiped his face, muttering, "Damn dust in the air." Hank chuckled softly. "Dust, my ass." By the time sirens began wailing miles away, the night was nearly over. The rival bikers were already disappearing into the desert. Engines fading into legend dots of Ridgefall Angels loaded what they could into their truck. Medical files, stolen drives, proof that Mara had been right all along. Wraith looked back at the burning plant, the fire reflecting in his eyes. She was never just a nurse. He said quietly, "She was trying to stop something bigger." Mara touched his arm. "You didn't have to save me." He met her gaze. "Yeah, I did." She smiled faintly. "I told Eli to find the man with the soul tattoo. I knew you'd still have a soul under there somewhere." He gave a small, tired laugh. "Don't spread that around. I've got a reputation to keep." Eli leaned against him, eyes half closed. The exhaustion of the night finally catching up. "You can be my dad for more than one day now, right?" Wraith hesitated, but nodded. "Yeah, kid, I think I can manage that." As dawn broke, the desert was quiet again. Smoke curled under the sunrise. The angels stood beside their bikes, faces lit by gold and ash. They weren't heroes, not in the world's eyes, but that night, they'd done what no law ever could. They'd saved one of their own. Not because they had to, but because it was right dot and for a man named Ghost. That was enough. He started his bike, the roar echoing across the canyon, and the angels followed him home, leaving behind fire, memories, and the first trace of redemption in a long, long time. The desert had gone silent again, without no engines, no shouts, no gunfire, only the hiss of cooling metal and the soft crackle of what was left of the ridgeline chemical plant. By sunrise, the fire was dying, leaving behind blackened skeletons of steel and an acrid perfume of smoke. The sirens were still miles away, distant, sinister, late as always. The law would come eventually, but late to matter, too early for anyone to kill. Wraith Ghost Donovan stood by his Harvey, watching the smoke twist under the pale light. His cut, the angel skull embroidered across his back, was singed, torn along one shoulder. Blood had dried across his collarbone. His hands were shaking, not from fear, but from the weight of still being alive. He took one last look at the plant, then he turned his bike toward home. The Ridgefall Angels clubhouse sat at the edge of town, half saloon, half sanctuary. By morning, the place smelled of whiskey and antiseptic. Mayor's doing inside. The men moved like ghosts themselves. No one spoke much. They were bandaging wounds, cleaning weapons, pouring coffee like panic. The adrenaline had burned off hours ago, leaving only exhaustion and a strain. Humming quiet, they didn't know what to do with it. Wraith pushed open the office door, and there she was Mara Alive. She sat on an old leather couch. wrapped in a blanket too big for her, sunlight pouring over her bruised face. Her hair was still damp from a makeshift wash. Her wrists wrapped in gauze. Eli slept beside her, curled up under her arm. A small patch of peace in a world that rarely offered any. For a long moment, Rafe just stood there, afraid that moving would make his vanished stepmom notice him and smiled faintly. "You would look worse than me," she smirked. "You should see the other guy." Her eyes softened. "I did." He crossed the room and sat opposite her, leaning forward with his elbows on his knees. The floor between them held the much history, fears, regrets, things unsaid. "Do you remember that night?" She asked quietly. "The highway outside Santa Fe? How could I forget?" He said, "You pulled a bullet out of me with a pair of tweezers and half a bottle of tequila. You screamed. I grunted. You begged me to knock you out." He allowed himself a ghost of a smile. Semantics. They both laughed softly, a sound that felt like breathing after drowning. Then Mare's expression changed, the humor dimmed. "When I saw what they were doing, moving people like cargo under medical cover, I knew I couldn't stop it alone. They had government clearance, ghost accounts, shell clinic. When I found out they'd used my name to move one of the shipments, I ran. I knew they'd come for me." Rafe's jaw tightened. "And you sent the boy to find me?" She nodded. "I told him to find the man with the skull tattoo. I didn't know if he'd still be alive, but if you were, I knew you'd protect him." Rafe leaned back, eyes distant. "You put a lot of faith in a man like me." "No," Laura said softly. "I put faith in the man I knew you were, the one who took a bullet for his brother, and still apologized to the cop who shot him. You're not a bad man, Rafe. You just forgot how to be a good one. That landed like a punch you didn't dodge." He looked down, rubbing his knuckles. The same hands that had killed, protected, built, broken. "Maybe," he murmured, "but I didn't forget what that feels like. You don't owe me anything." "Yeah," he said, meeting her eyes. "I do." Eli stirred on the couch, mumbling in his sleep before blinking awake. He saw Rafe and smiled the kind of smile that could split the hardest armor. "You didn't leave." Rafe shook his head. "Not my style." The boy sat up, hair sticking up, still holding the crumpled photograph, the one he carried all the way through the desert. He looked at it for a long time before handing it to Rafe. This time, Eli said, "Boy small, but certain. It's for you to keep." Rafe took it carefully, like it might break. The photo was worn, edges curled, Nora in her nursing uniform, smiling at something outside the frame. A little handprint marked the corner. He wanted to say something, "Thank you," maybe, but the words jammed in his throat. Instead, he reached out and ruffled the boy's hair. "You did good, kid." Eli grinned. "Mom says you don't smile much." "She's right. Then I'll make you." Rafe blinked. "Oh yeah?" The boy nodded solemnly. "You're my dad now, at least for one more breakfast." Something in the room cracked. Not loud, not visible. Just the sound of a heart remembering how to beat. Mara watched them quietly, her eyes glassy. She didn't interrupt. She knew what this was, a small miracle stitched out of room. They all ate together at the bar, pancakes again, because Eli insisted. The men pretended to complain, but none of them did. Hank flipped the griddle, Flynn found a bottle of syrup, and even Stone, who never smiled at anything human, cut his pancakes into neat triangles for the kid Dot. It was the strangest sight Ridgefall had ever seen. A table of leather-clad killers laughing softly at a child's joke Dot when Eli spilled his milk. Rafe reached over without thinking, wiping it up with a rag. The gesture was simple, but it stopped Mara cold. For one fleeting second, he looked like a father, not a stand-in, not a savior, just a man who cared. Eli climbed into his lap mid-breakfast, content as a cat. "You smell like smoke," he said. Rafe chuckled. "Better than motor oil." The boy grinned. "You smell like both." The laughter that followed wasn't forced. It was real, fragile, but arrived out by mid-morning, a safe car ride, a rusted station wagon driven by one of Mare's old friends from the clinic network. They lay low, heavy, find another name, another start. Eli didn't like it. He clung to Rafe's jacket, eyes filling with tears he didn't want anyone to see. "Can't we stay? Just for a while?" Mara crouched beside him. "Sweetheart, we can't, but we'll be okay, and he'll be right here." Eli turned to Rafe. "You promise?" Rafe, "No," meeting him eye to eye. "Yeah, you ever need me, you come back to Ridgefall. The angels don't forget family." The boy nodded. biting his lip. You'll keep the picture, right? Rafe smiled, quiet and sad, always. And then Eli did something that broke him clean into.
For the kid Dot,
He hugged him.
it was the strangest
Tight,
sight Ridgefall
desperate,
had ever
whispered,
seen.
"Bye,
A table
Dad."
of leather-clad
The
killers
word hit
laughing
Rafe like
softly at a
shrapnel.
child's
Not
joke
because
Dot.
it was loud, because it was true. He didn't cry, couldn't. But something inside him cracked open, a rusted lock finally giving way. He put a hand on the back of the boy's head, holding him for a moment longer than necessary, memorizing the weight of the small body against his chest. When Mark came to take Ellie's hand, she paused, her gaze meeting
Like a
Rafe
father,
one last time.
not a
There
stand-in,
was gratitude
not a
there,
savior,
and
just a
something
man
else.
who cared.
A
Dot
quiet
Eli climbed into
understanding
his lap
between the people
mid-breakfast.
who survived the same darkness and found a fragment of light in it. Take care of yourself, Ghost, she said softly. He almost
Content as a
laughed.
cat,
Not
you
like
smell
me,
like smoke,
but she smiled
he
anyway.
said. Rafe
Cried.
chuckled. Better than
The car
motor oil.
finally
The
disappeared
boy
down the
grinned.
dirt road.
You smell
The
like
clubhouse
both.
fell into
The laughter
stillness
that
again.
followed wasn't
The angels
forced.
lingered
It was
outside, watching the dust trail fade into the horizon. Tank clapped Rafe on the shoulder. "You good, boss?" Rafe didn't answer. He just stared at the empty road. Slim lit a cigarette, exhaling slow. "Never thought I'd see the day we went all hero for a nurse and her kid." Tank grinned. "Ain't every day we get called angels for real." Rafe gave a quiet
Hey,
laugh.
another
"Don't get
star.
used to it."
Eli
Deep
didn't
down,
like it. He
knew
clung to
something
Rafe's
had shifted
jacket,
in all of
eyes
them.
filling with
They
tears.
fought for more
He
than
didn't
pride
want
or
anyone to
territory.
see.
They
Can we
fought for
stay?
meeting Dot
Just for a
one
while.
night. At least they found it later. Rafe sat alone on the clubhouse steps, the desert wind tugging at his jacket. The sun was higher now, slicing through the smoke. He reached into his pocket and pulled out the photograph, creased, stained, still warm from his hand. He studied it for a long time. There, a smile, the faint background of a hospital ward, and there, barely visible in the corner, a boy's reflection in the glass behind her. He traced it with his thumb's eye Ghost. That was what they called him, because he lived
For
through
the
too
kid
many
Dot,
things
it was the strangest sight Ridgefall had ever seen. A table of leather-clad killers were laughing softly at a child's joke. Dot was
He wasn't
laughing.
a ghost anymore. He was a man with something worth remembering. That
But
night,
something inside him
Ridgefall
cracked
slept
open.
easier.
A rusted
Word
lock
spread
finally
through the
giving
bars
way.
and truck
He
stops.
put a hand on the
Whispers
back of the
angels
boy's
of
head,
fire.
holding him
Outlaws
for a
who
moment
rode
longer
through
than
hell to save
necessary.
a woman.
Memory.
Her child got no one to prove it. The cops wrote it off as a chemical accident. The government files disappeared like dust. But
Like a
Rafe
father
remembered.
last time. Not a stand as
He remembered the
gratitude.
roar
Not a
of
savior.
engines in the dark.
Just a man who
They
cared.
remembered
Dot
the
Eli
fire
climbed into his lap
understanding.
mid-breakfast,
They
survived
remembered
the
the
same
man who had once
darkness,
been nothing,
and found a
until
fragment of
little boy
light in
called
it.
him Dad.
Take care of
Rafe
yourself.
didn't keep the photo
Ghost,
in his wallet.
she said softly.
He kept it taped
He
almost
content as a
behind
cat.
the bar.
You smell like
The
smoke.
moonlight smiled
He
at
said.
first.
Rafe chuckled.
Every
Better than
sunlight
motor oil.
finally disappeared
The boy
down
grinned.
the road
You
before
smell
the
like
day
both.
fell into
The laughter that
stillness.
followed wasn't
Angels
forced.
lingered
It
outside.
was
Him could have
watching
one
the
good
dust
thing
trail
that
fade
didn't
into the
destroy.
horizon.
He'd never say
Tank
it
clapped
aloud,
Rafe on the
but
shoulder.
the others could
You
tell.
good, boss?
Something had changed
Rafe
in
didn't
their
answer. He
His
just
voice was quieter now. His temper, shorter with fools, but softer with brothers. And sometimes, when a lost kid wandered close to the wrong crowd, Rafe would find him a job sweeping the floor or fixing pipes.
Another
Maybe
star
was
to
nothing.
it. Eli
Deep
didn't
down,
like it.
everything died
He
in
clung to
something.
Rafe's
The
jacket,
legend
and
of
all
Rafe
eyes
fought
filling with
for
tears.
not
He
more than
didn't
pride
want
or
anyone to
territory.
see.
Whispered on the
Can
wind
we stay?
about
Just
the
for a
night the outlaws became angels. Not because they followed the law, but because they followed their
steps.
hearts.
The desert
Somewhere
wind tugging
out on
at
a
his
long
jacket.
desert highway,
The sun was
a
higher
boy in
now,
the backseat of the
slicing
station
through the
wagon pressed his forehead to the window, watching the road stretch behind him. He smiled and whispered, "Drive safe, Dad." The boy couldn't have been more than 8, barefoot, clutching a torn backpack. He stood at the edge of the biker lot, a world of roaring engines and leather vests that smelled of oil and smoke. When he spoke, his voice was steady for someone that
For
small.
the kid Dot, it was the strangest sight Ridgefall had ever seen. A table of leather-clad killers were laughing softly at a child's joke. Dot was laughing.
Killed his engine, stepped off his Harley, and asked, "Who sent you?"
But something inside him cracked open easier. A rusted lock finally giving way. He put a hand on the back of the boy's head, holding him for a moment longer than necessary. Memory.
A pale orange sun pushed through a wall of dust, painting the town of Ridgefall in the color of rust and regret. We carried the Senate
Like a father last time, not a stand as gratitude, not a savior. Just a man who cared. Dot Eli climbed into his lap mid-breakfast, survived the same darkness, and found a fragment of light in it. Take care of yourself. Keep the ghost in his wallet. She said softly. He content as a cat. You smell like smoke. He said. Rafe chuckled. Better than motor oil. suddenly disappeared. The boy grinned and rode. You smell like clothes. Fell in. The laughter that followed wasn't forced. Lingered out. Watching the dust trail fade into the horizon, he'd never seen clap Rafe on the shoulder. Others could do good. Boss, Rafe didn't answer. He just...
A lazy breeze riff barely audible beneath the sound of snoring men and creaking furniture. A few bikers lay passed out on the floor, patches gleaming under the neon light. Rafe thought after. Angels till death.
Another star to it. Eli didn't like it. He clung to Rafe's jacket, and all eyes filling with tears. He didn't want anyone to see. Can we stay? Just for...
That Rafe ghost Donovan, 40-something, built like a man who'd been through more fights than
the desert wind tugging at his jacket. The sun was higher now, backseat slicing through the smoke.
The one on his right forearm, the grin is still breathing smoke. He was cleaning his gun, quiet and methodical, as dawn leaked through the blind. The others knew better than to disturb him during these hours. The silence before the day's rise, the ritual that kept his demons at bay. Rafe was the kind of man who didn't believe in second chances. For life,
when the kid died, it was the strangest sight Ridgeville had ever seen. By his head, leather-clad killers were laughing softly at the cows. Joey Todd was laughing.
Little swirl spinning across the parking lot.
But something inside him cracked open easier. A rusted lock finally giving way. He put a hand on the back of the boy's head, holding him for a moment longer than necessary. Mid-memory.
But now looked more like the dessert itself. He clutched something in his hands, a creased photograph, and walked with it.
Like a father has to understand his gratitude to the Savior. It's just a man who cared Donnie like climbed in his lap mid-breakfast, survived the same darkness, nothing, and found a fragment of light. Called him Dad. Take care of yourself. Keep the ghost in his wall. She said softly. Take it content as a cat. You smell like smoke. She smiled. He said. Rafe chuckled. Every better than motor oil. The boy grinned and rode. You smell like clothes. Fell in. The laughter that followed wasn't forced. Lingered out. Watching the dust trail fade into the horizon, he'd never seen clap Rafe on the shoulder. Others could do good. Boss, Rafe didn't answer. He just...
out of his mind. I'm looking for someone. He said, Tank frowned. Kid, this ain't no church. You lost. The boy shook his head, gripping the photograph title. My mom said,
another star to it. Eli didn't like it. He clung to Rafe's jacket, and all eyes filling with tears. He didn't want anyone to see. Can we stay? Just for...
A biker named Slim leaned forward from the couch, a cigarette dangling from his mouth.
Steps. The dessert wind tugging at his jacket. The sun was higher now, backseat slicing through the smoke.
You hear that, Ghost? He's looking for your ugly mug. Rafe didn't look up. Tell him to keep walking. But the boy took a few steps closer, his shoes scraping the concrete. He held out the photograph, shaking but determined. Please, sir, my mom said you'd help. She said you owe her a life. That stopped everything, even the radio went silent. They finally looked at his time.
It was the strangest sight Ridgeville had ever seen. By his head, leather-clad killers were laughing softly at the cows. Joey Todd was laughing.
In his hand, old, bent, creased, but
Quickly, that something inside him cracked open easier. A rusted lock finally giving way. He put a hand on the back of the boy's head, holding him for a moment longer than necessary. Mid-memory.
For the first time in years, he forgot to breathe. The room blurred for a moment, replaced by a memory, asphalt under his back.
Like a father has to understand his gratitude to the Savior. It's just a man who cared Donnie like climbed in his lap mid-breakfast, survived the same darkness, nothing, and found a fragment of light. Called him Dad. Take care of yourself. Keep the ghost in his wall. She said softly. To take it content as a cat. You smell like smoke. He smiled. He said. Rafe chuckled. Every better than motor oil. The boy grinned and rode. You smell like clothes. Fell in. The laughter that followed wasn't forced. Lingered out. Watching the dust trail fade into the horizon, he'd never seen clap Rafe on the shoulder. Others could do good. Boss, Rafe didn't answer. He just...
He tried to tell her to leave, but they'd come back, but she didn't. When he woke up in his hospital bed 2 days later, she was gone. No name, no record, just a ghost who saved the ghost.
Another star to it. Eli didn't like everything that he clung to Rafe's jacket, and all eyes filling with tears. He didn't want anyone to see. Can we stay? Just for...
Rafe asked, Eli, where's your mom now? The boy hesitated.
Steps. The dessert wind tugging at his jacket. The sun was higher now, backseat slicing through the smoke.
If she didn't come back, you make sure I was safe. A murmur rippled through the room. Rafe's expression didn't change, but his fingers curled in a fist. She didn't come back from where?
Ellie's voice broke when he spoke. Some men came. They had guns. She told me to run. Hank knelt down beside the boy. His gravelly voice softened now. What kind of men? Eli shook his head. I don't know. They had black talk. But one of them said something about the shipment. They could squeeze a lucky swim. The time Mel said this isn't random. Ridgefall was full of dirty deals and missing people. But this smelled different. Took out the kitchen water and the family. He looked like he hadn't seen food in days. He was right. She told them fragments of the story. How they moved from town to town. How his mom worked in clinics and shelters, patching up addicts and drifters to free. She said people don't need heroes. She said tragedy. They just need someone who doesn't walk away. That line hit Ray's harder than the whiskey ever could. She studied the boys and others pretended not to. There was a small star on Ellie's arm, clean, cold, physical. The kind of star that caused someone to learn how to shoot news. Your mom did it. Ray thought God knew my mom. She said I fell out of God, but I think she lied. She always lied, but she wanted to protect me. Ray flipped away, swallowing hard. God had been like that too. Somewhere from the inside, breaking on the inside dot by noon. The clubhouse felt smaller, as if the walls were closing in. Slim wanted to take the boy to the sheriff. Hank argued that while the safe Ridgefall's cops were more loyal to cash than conscience. Hank said nothing for a long time. He just stared at the photograph. One place in the overpass did not give him interest. Finally, he stood and walked toward the boy. You said your mom told you to find the man with the skull tattoo. They said, you don't know. Why? She said you owe her a lot. They felt so they were our level. You know what that means. Kill. Eli met his gaze, unflinching. It means you're supposed to save someone, and now it's my turn. Something in that answer. Innocent. Brutal. True. Cracked something open in Ray. He hadn't felt it yet. That night, after the others drifted out, Ray sat alone in the garage. The boy was asleep on a couch. A blanket that big for him pulled up to his chin. One smoked in silence, staring at the skull tattoo on his arm. The dessert went out of the window, carrying echoes of the past. The sound of gunfire, a woman's voice saying, "Women back tonight." He pulled out his old photo album, the one he swore he'd never opened again. The size of the ghost of another life, Patrick from Fallen Brother, his gold paper, and a blood-stained piece of cloth from the night. He almost died, and tucked inside that cloth, a name written on the back of a clinic card, Mark Kelly. He's never gone looking for her. Maybe he's been afraid to. Maybe he thought he didn't exist. But now her son was sleeping under his roof. She was out there somewhere, and breathing. Reading words. Ray pressed out a cigarette and stood. His reflection in the window looked older than it could have. But his eyes were alive again, sharp, focused. Filled with a purpose he hadn't felt in the distance. He turned to Hank. He'd been quietly watching from the doorway. With the boys, Ray said, "We're gonna find her." Hank raised an eyebrow. You sure about that? Could be a trap. Ray's voice was low, steady. Don't care. That woman saved my life once. I ain't letting her slip away. He looked toward the cabin. There Eli stirred in his feet, murmuring his mother's name. Besides, Ray got it quieter. He was already lost enough. By the time the engines roared the light outside, the dessert was dark again. The ghosts of Ridgefall were awake. Ray didn't know yet what he was riding into. The hijinks of trouble ran. All he knew was this. The woman who once refused to let him die had sent her son to him for a reason, and for the first time in years, the outlaw known as Ghost Donovan felt like he might be about to live for something, or someone, that actually mattered. The morning started with the sound of engines, a low, steady rumble that seemed to shake the dessert away. Great Ghost Donovan stood beside his Harley, watching the sun climb over Ridgefall, a light column pulling on a cracked asphalt, on the dust that never seemed to settle. Here, he wasn't used to mornings that felt this quiet, or this strange. A kid was sleeping on his clubhouse tonight. A kid who called him Dad, even if just for one day. The landlord wrote, he breathed like someone who didn't quite trust that the world was still here. Ray handed him a mug of cocoa, dark, no sugar, the only kind they had, and a breakfast sandwich wrapped in foil about the boy held it with both hands. You made this, not exactly, Ray said, half grinning. Hank burned off. I rescued it. He nothing. Eli laughed softly, a sound that startled the viewers. The other bikers froze mid-argument, like they just heard something rare and delicate. He was the
first time any of them had seen Ruth smile, without whiskey behind it. Later that morning, the kids' list came up again. Half a joke, half a dare. Big Dude said he wanted one of us to feel bad for a day. Lynn asked, leaning against his bike dot, Eli nodded. Yeah, just one day. That's what Mom said to ask for. Rafe gave him a curious look. Why one day? Eli thought about it. She said one day is enough to see who someone really is. That's what Slim up. Rafe figured there was no harm in it.
The kid needed distraction, and maybe, if he was honest, so did he. So he told the boys to clear their schedules. No business.